Hello, everybody. Welcome to the semi-weekly Tablas Creek Instagram live broadcast. I'm Jason Haas. This is not a normal venue for me to do this. This is also not a normal condition for me to be in. So I have actually been out of the vineyard for the last week with COVID. I'm feeling almost entirely better, but still, unfortunately, not testing negative. So here I am at home. So what you get as a backdrop is, unfortunately, not Tablas Creek. You get the Haas Vineyard where we make our full circle Pinot Noir. That shouldn't change this. I did get out and wander around the vineyard, carefully distanced from other people this morning, and get some pictures of what things look like out at Tablas. And I'll share those in a moment, but I did want to give a little teaser. My guest this week is somebody I am incredibly excited to talk to. It's Julia Coney, who's a great writer, a great speaker, a great advocate for diversity and inclusion in wine. I think one of the most important voices in wine right now. And I'm super looking forward to diving into her story and hearing from her. But as I always do, while we're waiting for people to join, I want to share a few pictures of what things look like. So the big news for us is that we are seeing veraison. So I'll start you with Mourvèdre. And veraison is just when the grapes start to turn color, start to sweeten up. There's still more green than red overall in the vineyard, particularly with these later ripening grapes like Mourvèdre. Quick run through some of the other important grapes. Syrah is definitely the furthest along. You can see the clusters are mostly red. Grenache is somewhere in the middle. So there's a picture of Grenache. Kind of looks like jewels, as it always does. Counoise is, as usual, bringing up the rear. I had trouble finding clusters with a whole lot of purple berries in there, but there are a few if you dig around. And even the whites are getting into the game. So it's not as obvious when whites go through veraison as it is with reds, but this is Viognier. You can see it's starting to turn a little more yellow as opposed to that kind of green like a leaf. So that's the big change in the vineyard. In the cellar, we're getting ready. We figure we're maybe 2 weeks out from starting. We're getting all of the bins pulled out and washed. We are getting all of our equipment pulled out, washing the destemmer, washing the sorting table, all that, getting our last blends done for the 2022 vintage so that can all get put away. We don't have to worry about it during harvest. And then we'll be off. So, okay, I'm going to stop sharing and then I'm going to invite Julia to join. Invitation, and we will have the split screen conversation in a moment. But it feels imminent, finally, after what felt like a summer where the grapes would never turn red and it would never get warm. It's now warm and beautiful and perfect, and the grapes are turning red, and it feels like we're actually going to have a harvest. Hi, Julia.
Hey, can you hear me?
I can hear you,
okay,
and
good.
I can see you. You look good. You sound good.
Thank you.
Cheers. Yes,
Cheers.
I'm sorry I'm not joining you with wine. I figured that really until I fully kick this bout of COVID, I should probably stay away from
Yes.
the imbibing.
It's been a day, but I feel like I haven't done a live in a long time, and usually I do them with a wine glass, so I was like, okay, we're going to open up some bubbly, so I'm here.
I was hoping that you would. You had said you were planning to, and
Yes.
it just, it felt right.
It's Napa Cab Classique. It's good. It's fun.
So let's start there. What's in
Okay.
your glass?
So in my glass is a Napa Cab Classique from Simonsig in the Cape. It is Pinot Noir, Pinotage, and Pinot Meunier. So it's a blend of all three. So it's really light. It's fun. It's Wednesday. I'm in DC. I'll be in Houston tomorrow. Then I'll be in Louisiana tomorrow night. So needed something.
Awesome. It's great. And I want to talk about champagne because I don't think it's any I don't think it's any secret that you are one of the biggest fans of champagne and also one of the most knowledgeable people about champagne that I know. But I don't want to jump there yet. I actually
Okay.
want, I, I heard an interview where you said you grew up without wine on your table. You grew up Pentecostal, right?
I
So
grew
that
up
meant no.
Pentecostal and Baptist, if you merge those two, and then we were part of United Pentecostal, and my family doesn't drink. The majority of them still do not drink.
Can you talk about how you came to wine? Like, what was your path?
So I was working at a law firm because thinking I was going to go to law school, and it was crazy. And I was drinking margaritas, and the boss I had at the time had just been to Napa. This is 1999, so it was totally different Napa. And all the boxes of wine got delivered to the office in front of my desk. And I was like, Bob, you got to move this. Like, what is this? And he was like, I thought you studied abroad in Paris. I'm like, you drink wine because soda was too expensive. Like, that was the thing in Paris when you study. And so he had a barbecue at his house a few weeks later, and he paired brisket, roasted chicken, pulled pork. I mean, all this with all these crazy Napa wines, Opus, Camus, Clos de Vol. And I was like, what is this? How do they get all these strawberries and cherries in this wine? I'm trying to explain it to myself. And he was like, you should go to Napa. And that's what I did. A few months later, I went to Napa. And that was like the first time. And that got the bug, but I didn't think about working in it.
So wait, you had already been in France though, and you had already sort of discovered wine in France. So you're one
But
of the
not like
relatively
discovered wine like the way we do it here. I discovered wine because as a broke college student, when they tell you that to get wine, a salad, and an omelet is $2 cheaper than having a soda, well, you just drink the carafe of wine. Like, it made sense. But, it wasn't like, oh, this is great, this is paired, this is this. He just really broke wine down to me very simplistically.
Okay, so you started sort of with Napa Cabs, it sounds like.
Oh, I started with Napa Cabs. Yeah.
I love that Napa Cab and brisket pairing. That sounds kind
Oh,
of
it's
perfect.
so good. And it was no sauce. I have to be clear. It is like dry rub. Texas isn't known for a lot of sauce. So I have to, when I tell that to people, I'm like, oh, it was just rub brisket sandwiches and like pulled pork and ribs. And that to me was how I think about wine always. Food.
Yeah, oh, for sure. So take that the next step. So what was your next step on your wine journey from saying, okay, these Napa Cabs are great, it's great with these foods. What was next for you?
I had to go to Bordeaux because I had to see if Napa was doing this. Well, and they're getting it from Bordeaux. It was like, let's go to Bordeaux. And I didn't go like, let me go Bordeaux door to door. I was like, I'm going to do a bike tour. If I'm going to do it, I'm going to make it fun. And I found a bike tour through my travel agent at the time. And I biked through Bordeaux. And like, you would stop at all these vineyards. And I remember one time I was like, I am just sick of riding on this bike. And they were like, you don't have to you can just ride in a van. I was like, okay, let's do that to the next stop. And one of the main stops was Chateau Smith Haute Lafitte. It was like, wow, oh, okay. And that was 2000. That was a year later. Like, it was one of those, I just liked wine and I wanted to just travel and eat. I thought about it. I wasn't thinking about career-wise at all.
So at this point, were you still thinking about going to law school? Was that still the next plan?
I was thinking about going to law school, and then I got waitlisted. And my mom told me, well, that might be a sign that you shouldn't go. And I was like, yeah, that might be a sign. And I had been going back and forth that I wanted to move somewhere besides Houston. I grew up in Houston. I wanted to live somewhere else. And so in 2005, I moved to DC. Like, I kept working, but I switched, like, there's litigation, in law firms. And then I moved to technology. And so we started working on like patents. And I was like, well, the patents office in DC, the main court is in DC. And so I decided to move to DC. And that was one of the best decisions I ever made.
How come? Well, what about DC was it that kind of opened New World up?
I feel like it was so different from Texas, but it was so close to everything on the East Coast. I could hop on a train and be in so many states all the time. That was the first time I ever saw snow, like living in snow. I froze my butt off when I first moved to DC. I was like, this place is cold. But in DC, I started a blog while I was working at the law firm. And the blog changed the trajectory of my life.
Right. So this was a beauty blog, though, right? This was not...
Yeah. I started a beauty blog because I was traveling to Asia, and I always liked skincare and fragrance. I mean, in France, like, there's wine, but there's this culture of beauty, of like skincare, fragrances. Like, everyone's talking about it now, but the French have been doing like lymphatic drainage and massages and all this kind of stuff as like wellness more than like we do it because it's a birthday. And that was what made me like, okay, let's start this beauty blog. And it just happened to take off. And that was like crazy because I'm doing both jobs at the same time for 4 straight years.
And so you ended up kind of parlaying that into a freelance writing career, but still in the beauty world, right?
Still in beauty in 2010. Like I left my job and I was like, if I need to do this, I'm put all of it in. And I did that for 5 years. I was like freelance and I was writing about travel. I was writing about beauty. I was all these things. And what made me really start, I was still drinking wine and I had gotten married. And my husband was like, you in this wine thing, like, yeah, it's the beauty thing, but you in this wine thing. And I was like, I know. And I was like, I know more than most Psalms because I've actually been to the region. So like when we went to dinner, I would be like, well, I've been to Tuscany. I've been to Piedmont. I've been to Campania. Okay. And just, I was like, maybe. And I didn't know. And I knew I didn't want to be a Psalm. Like that's the thing. And at that time, Psalm came out, the movie.
Right.
And watching that, I was like, oh God, that's not me. Like, I'm like, I don't want to memorize things. I don't want to work at a restaurant. And I just kept going, well, maybe not. And I went back and forth and I started taking classes just as wine classes as hobbies at the wine school in DC. And in 2015, I just, I can say it on here, the Kardashians came out. And the way I like beauty is not their version of beauty. Like, I like the guy who is the scientist. I like the person who makes the fragrance. And at that time, I had been interviewing perfumers, and they all kept relating perfume to wine. And I was like, okay, I see that. We've been in Gross. We're selecting flowers. We're out in the fields. Okay, this is just like wine. It's so much like wine. And so I decided to stop my beauty blog after 10 years and do wine in 2016.
Do you remember what the first article was that you wrote about wine?
It was the fact that I couldn't actually wear fragrance to a wine tasting. Like I had to like.
That's the bridge right there. That's the connector.
And I was like, what? Like, and they were like, no. Like, and I was like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, people smoke and they smell like smoke. Why can't I wear like my fragrance? And they were like, well, it hinders it. And it was it's an op-ed about the conundrum I was having of I love wine, but not being able to wear a fragrance as a fragrance person.
As somebody who has poured at wine tastings, I don't really like it when people have smoked before they come to wine tastings either. Like,
yes, but that's why, like, you go to those tastings, especially if they're European tastings, everyone smells like smoke. And I'm like, my little fragrance is like impeding this. I don't think so. But I don't wear it. Like, I don't wear it to any tastings. I have to say that. I have to say that. I do not wear it if I'm tasting publicly.
Cool. Okay, so when you were starting to write about wine, did you have any particular inspirations among wine writers or among writers of, well, it doesn't even have to be about wine?
Dorothy Gator and John Brescher, because of course that like they are like my mecca of writing. That's how I say. And it's because when I was getting into wine, they were at the same time they were writing the tastings column for the Wall Street Journal, and they were writing wine, and they never really talked about a note. They really just talked about the story and people drinking wine. And that was to me like, oh, okay, I like that version. And then I like the technical too. Like I liked them both, but they were more like my style of relating wine to life. And
they're lovely people also. And I think that comes
yes.
through in their writing. I was lucky enough to have them as guests a couple of months ago on this conversation. And like, you can tell that wine for them is a part of their relationship. It's not just a beverage. It's people, it's history, it's travel, it's connection, it's culture.
It's life. It's life. It's life. And they told stories of people having those moments in their life where wine meant something, right? And so I still think about like sitting in Bob's house in Houston, and that wine changed because I also was curious because he was so into it too. He was so always excited about opening a bottle and also sharing bottles. Like he was a collector who shared. I'm really into collectors who share.
Best kind.
The best guy. And so that's, yeah.
So I think I'm a little embarrassed it wasn't earlier, but I think like I first read something by you. You sort of came onto my radar when you wrote that amazing open letter to Karen McNeil back in 2018, talking about she had written, for people who don't know, she had written an article about kind of the glass ceiling for women in wine. And I think there were 36 other women in wine who she talked to, and she didn't talk to a single Black woman for this
Yeah.
for this piece. And you wrote an open letter that got a huge amount of traction and press because,
Yeah.
I mean, you clearly were pointing out a blind spot that was there. Can you talk a little bit about that, the experience of doing that, and what the reactions were that you got?
Yeah. I want to start off with saying Karen and I are like we're friends now. So I just want to say that we're cool. I wrote it at a time that I would see all these other wine writers get invited on these press trips, media trips. And I was doing a lot of tastings in DC and New York, and people didn't think I worked in wine. Like I remember literally a guy in DC telling me he thought I was the help because I had on black at a tasting at a restaurant. And I was, like floored. And the people who were putting it on was like, get out the tasting, like leave. Like, what are you talking about? And then in New York, had to go up some stairs to a tasting. And the security guy like put his arm, like wouldn't let me go up the stairs because he was like, you're not a wine person. And it was just, yeah. And the PR people were just, oh my God, let her in. It was that kind of reaction. And so when I saw that thing, my mother was living at the time and I was complaining to her and she was like, well, what are you going to do about it? She was like, because I don't want to hear this. I want to know what is the solution going to do. She's like, you're a writer. You write it out. And I first wrote something and she just was like, absolutely not. You come off too angry. You're not being open. Be a writer. Use your words. And I was like, okay. And that's when I rewrote it. And I said, okay, I'm going to hit publish on my blog. And at first, she was at school. Like I called her out of school and she was like, if you don't hit publish, do not call me again today. And I hit publish and I closed my computer and I was like, I'm just going to the gym. And I wrote and I was like, I'm not open. And the next day I woke up and it was the amount of emails, the amount of attention that got was like people really started to see their own issues and biases in the world of wine. And I was like, yeah. And that was 2018. So that was before 2020.
Right. Yeah. And I feel like in general in wine, like people's motives are good, but there are so many blind spots. And so
Yes.
like for that piece, for me, it was such an eye opener of, oh, right. Like that's a huge blind spot. And
yeah.
It seems like, and again, maybe this is me looking through overly rose-colored glasses, but it seems like there is no way that article that Karen published could ever be published today, and that there has been enough progress, at least in the world of wine, that somebody would point out at that point, like maybe this is not a fully representational group of wine professionals.
I wouldn't say it couldn't be published. I would hesitate that somewhere along the line it probably eventually will. There'll be something like that in the next couple of years. I feel like we're past 2020 and we're past where like black and buy black do black or brown people buy BIPOC, and I can see where that is still a problem.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you can see where that's a problem.
Yeah.
I'm sure, but yeah, well, I'm hopeful at least that somebody would have flagged that and saying maybe this deserves another thought before this makes it all the way through all those editors and into print.
Yeah, I hope so too, but I'm not that optimistic. Yeah.
So talk about this sort of segues neatly into the creation of the Black Wine Professionals website and organization that you created, and that came out of the George Floyd movement and all of that, right, in 2020, if I'm remembering.
It came out of 2020. And what I wanted to do, because I knew so many people of color in wine, that's really where it came from. I was like, I know so many people who are never quoted in a magazine. They've never given these awards. You have a lot of people who've worked, and you'll have a SOM trip, an importer trip, a distributor trip to a wine region, and they never had people of color at all on these trips. So that's what made me start this listserv of people who have been working 3 years or more in various capacities in wine, because at that time, everything was like, how do we get more people in wine? And I still believe in all those. I'm a mentor for like Wine Unify. I work with Batonage, Live Collective. So I believe in all of them. But I still was like, if we're getting people in wine, what about the people that have already done the work?
Yeah.
And they're currently not being rewarded. And so I'm so proud of that list, because we keep adding people. So when they need this person to get quoted, they don't have to come to me. Like, I don't want to be the only one. So now they have a list of over 300 people that they can go to.
Yeah, and it's such a great resource. Do you have any particularly cool success stories from that group that you feel like sharing?
I think like Tanya Pitts, who's in San Francisco, like Assam and Tanya Pitts. I mean, I feel like she's finally getting her flowers. I think it's very, very important, that there are quoted, that there are people who, like are on that list, but they're also like, they're in wine, wine enthusiasts. They were 40, under 40, they're future 40 now. Like, they're getting quoted, and that is a beautiful thing. And they're also getting hired. Let's talk about that. Yeah. They're getting hired to lead seminars. They're getting hired to lead continuing workshops. Also, I love it when I see them traveling to a region as a group and they're with their peers. That wouldn't have happened, honestly, before 2020. I know, because I used to like stalk the trips from the hashtag, and I'm like, okay, they have this person, but that person, they were on 4 other trips this year. And like, why isn't there another person on that trip? I mean, a lot of times, even now when I get invited, I always ask them to consider someone else first. Like, it's like I get to travel and I get to do that, and that's great. But like, I needed my list of being able to say, here's a person you should reach out to. And what I do is like, I reply back, thank you for the invitation. Please add such and such in my place. Here's their contact information. So I don't give them a chance to go like back and forth. I'm like, nope, here's a person.
Oh, that's great. And I love that you called out Tanya. I mean, she's amazing. She's been amazing forever. But
she's been amazing forever.
But it's different seeing her now have a national profile. She's not just a really cool buyer who I got to see when I was in San Francisco. She's somebody who,
exactly,
people are quoting, people are inviting to do stuff. People are like, she's on panels, she's in articles. It's great.
Yeah, that's like one, like, and there's so many. There's like Larissa DuBose in Atlanta. You have like, I just look at the list and I'm just so happy that we can continue adding people. We can continue, like, now I'm going to like, I'm revamping the website, and we're going to add like all like the vintners, the different brands. And I mean, I'm even going to add like people who actually make like fruit wine. Like, I'm trying to figure out those, like, any kind of even alternative form of wine, because I think they need to be there as well and know that exists. So that's like a big project launching next year, is like getting all that list, contact information and everything on. So when we can say, hey, these are the people, these are your vintners, these are the brands, these are people. And so they have all that. It's just like a labor of love I'm going to use my holiday time to do it.
Yeah. And I love the way that you described it, because you're right. There's 2 pieces. There's like getting new people into the funnel.
Yes.
Like you need people of color who are entering the industry, who are feeling welcome, who have mentorship opportunities. But then you also need to create the networks, make sure that there's not the excuse, oh, well, I didn't know any people of color who were
exactly
who could have filled this. And they're both essential.
Yeah, and also people who own like retail spaces, because sometimes, in stories, they will quote a retailer. The retailer, what they're seeing in their marketplace. And so I'm happy to see all those. So we're going through a big revamp in the beginning of 2024. So, yeah.
Cool. So I can't remember what article I read you quoted in, but you mentioned, and I think this was a couple of years ago, that you thought that spirits was way ahead of wine in terms of really kind of embracing and reaching out to the Black community. Do you feel like that is still true? Do you feel like there's progress being made?
Yes.
What's your
I still believe it. I still believe it. So I recently watched the Silicon Valley DTC survey, the video that came out. Yeah. Spirit marketing is 6% to people. Wine is 2%. So if we just think of the percentage that wine markets to people, is already lower, right? But if you look at spirits, if you look at the commercials, if you look all over spirits, They're all different races, all different shapes, sizes in the spirits world. You don't see that in wine. Like if you pick up any magazine really now, you don't see that if you look at the ads.
Right.
And even sometimes like I'll go and a winery wants to talk with me. I'll literally go on their social media page. It was like, please diversify your page. Show me your vineyard workers that don't look like you, the owner. Show me your tasting room staff who are these great people, because you know that they're there as well. Highlight those people. Highlight your vineyard workers so we can see them, tell their story. That makes me apt to actually want to taste your wine and buy your wine.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's the basics.
It's just it's not really that hard. That's why I'm still so frustrated. It is really not that hard.
And I've always thought of it as, I mean, there's two things. I mean, yes, you want to embrace diversity and inclusion because it's the right thing to do, but also it's good business. Like that, it's
such good.
I mean,
I tell people all the time, Black people spend money. Black people spend money. I can only speak for being Black. That's how I identify myself. We spend money, and the fact that like even when I went to Cognac, it was said to me, because I lead a trip to Cognac, that Black people save Cognac. That was said to me. Like they understand, they have a whole thing like in Hennessy where they highlight basketball. Like it is there, but then when you see people like, oh, I don't know. And I could say I understand, but now I don't. I could say, because it's one of those, it's like you're choosing not to.
Right.
That's it. You're choosing not to. It's kind of like even if I was in California in March and went to a tasting. I walked in a tasting room and walked right out. Because I can see they didn't want me in a tasting room. Like I could just see, I just went there to taste. I didn't ask for a free tasting. I wanted to walk in and I registered and everything. And it was just felt like you're not interested in me tasting wine with you at your facility. And guess what? I'm like, you know what? There is too many wineries out here because I was there for work. There are too many wineries. Bye. And so, yeah. Absolutely. And I have a note in my phone called wineries to not taste. And literally, I just add every time. I just add. And the PR sometimes they don't know when they're sending like a press release what happens. And I'm usually telling them like, this is what happened, and this is why I won't taste their wine. You please bring it back to them and let them know. That's not my job to continue to talk. It's just not my job.
No, but it is. I think pretty essential that you have that list. And that, I mean.
That's just my personal list. I'm not publishing it. I tell people I'm not publishing it. It's just for me to know I'm not drinking their wine because sometimes I'll forget. And I always say too, I don't want to drink wine from assholes. No. And so I don't drink wine from assholes. There's too much wine out there. Like I'm not.
That's good life advice in general.
Yeah.
Like, don't support assholes.
Don't support assholes.
Yeah.
And it's like, especially if they're continuing to be. I mean, we all have I believe we can all have a possibility to be that person. I'm not the finest on some days. I get that. But when you're talking business, you have to look a different way. You have to say, okay, why am I not wanting to promote this or do this or what it goes back to me? And somebody has to be the change. And a lot of them are doing that. So I highlight the ones that are doing the work.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
100%. Okay, let's talk about some of your current writing work. So I see your byline in VinePair regularly. Yeah. I know you're the columnist for Sweet July. Can you talk about some of the stuff you've been writing recently? Any place important that I missed? No,
you didn't miss. So I took the last 3 or 4 months kind of like not writing for anyone really, and decided like, how do I want to do that? Kind of like revamp, because I felt like I was just turning things out. So I still freelance, but I just launched my own Substack subscription because I can get paid for my work. And that is continual work. I don't have to pitch it. I don't have to worry if it's going to fit this month's thing or that, and I just want to write about wine. And like, that's why I started with Dan from Massacre. Wine you should be drinking. That's how I want to talk about wine. This is why I'm drinking this wine. I want you to get it, drink it as well. And I just want to promote producers that I feel don't get a lot of spotlight as well. People really don't know them. Maybe you have to seek them out. And I've been lucky enough to taste with them. So that's what I'm writing about. I'm writing interesting wines made by interesting people. And I feel like for $5 a month or $50 a year, It's not that bad. And I support a lot of writers, right? I support a lot of people on Patreon because I believe in their work. So I always say, if I bought a matcha at Starbucks, that's $6.50. I might as well give that to a person per month to support their work, because I think we're at that time, like, people don't value writers the same. Journalism, you know it. I mean, you know, journalism, and it's hard, right? You know, you're trying to get with, I get why magazines are, it's hard to do a great magazine. It's harder than most people think. But I wanted to be able to write about what I want when I want it, and not go like, okay, like I'm gonna send 7 pitches about this one person that I met in Paso and nobody knows. I was like, no, I'm just gonna write about him because I want to write about him.
Yeah, no,
And that makes me happy.
I think it's such a, you're far from the only person who I've heard express that basic idea, that it's like that print journalism is really hard right now.
It's really hard. I mean, thank God. I mean, you know, I lead wine trips around the world, so that kind of helps facilitate and, you know, other stuff. But at my core, I'm a writer, right? So I like words. I like video too, but I love words. I read your newsletter because you're telling me something I don't know about what's going on in a vineyard, right? And people are still, I feel connected. And I think people are still wanting to feel connected that way. I usually read a lot of my newsletters on the weekends. I don't expect people to like really open during the week. I know a lot of them read things on the weekend, they have more time. So that's why I was like, I can control this narrative. And that's why I started the paid newsletter. So, yeah, I mean, part of it's paid, part of it's free. So yeah, I'm still finding my footing. I know I just launched it last week. So I have goals that I'm trying. I'm reading like things, and so yeah, it's those kind of things that I'm excited about. Yeah.
Cool. And you're also working as consultant for American Airlines too,
yes.
right?
Yes, that's a lot of fun until I get a spreadsheet of like all the wines. I mean, I didn't realize how much wine is moved on a plane every single day. Every single day, different routes, different plane configurations, they all get different wine.
Right.
And you know, you're tasting through wines every 6 months for the next 3 months. So we're 6 months ahead. You know, but it's also very exciting because it's the planes and also the lounges.
Right.
So I get to see what moves and everything.
And are there different, like, I know wine can taste sort of weird at altitude on a plane. Are you looking for different things in wines that you're recommending for lounges versus for planes?
High acid, and I have like a weird way I taste. So if we're tasting wines for economy, I won't taste them in a glass. I taste them in the cup that is on American Airlines. A plastic cup, right? And then I pinch my nose because like I pinch it and try to think about what somebody's going to taste. It's like, and then I think about the snacks, right? What snacks are people, what are the American snacks, right? What snacks they have on a plane, the little box. And so I always go and taste those with the wines because I'm looking for what acid is there.
Okay.
But I realize if holding your nose, it just blocks a lot of the senses, almost like you're up in the air.
Honestly, that's sort of like whatever I am. Like 1 week into COVID, like that's basically like I realize I'm sort of tasting just with my mouth. I can't really, like, all of the subtle stuff from my nose, that's still not back yet. Like, yeah.
And so I think about how like that happens. And so then if it's, you know, business, the glass is different, right? So I wouldn't taste in a glass with a big stem. They don't have those on planes. Right. So when I go, I have them bring all the glassware that is in the cabin on the whole plane, and I taste everything in those glasses, because otherwise, you know, it's like, oh well, I could taste it in a Riedel. There's no Riedel on the plane, so it makes no sense to have some fancy glass.
Cool.
Yeah.
So back to sort of where we started. Like, I don't think it's a surprise. Anybody who knows you or follows you knows you're a huge fan of champagne. Do you have any, actually, I'm going to ask you sort of two pieces of that. Okay. One, do you have any kind of unexpectedly great champagne pairings? And two, because I'm sure you do.
I do.
And two, if people are like, if people just know kind of the big champagne houses, what's sort of the next step for them for you? What do you think the right next step is for them to learn really what champagne's all about?
I tell people all the time, Google grower champagnes, people who grow the grapes, because that's where for me, in 2016, I went to Champagne for the first time. And I went to this store, this lunch in Epernay. And I was actually right after planning to go to a big house and do a tasting. But we needed to do lunch first. And we had this 8-course lunch with only grower champagne, right? And I am losing my mind because I didn't know they existed. I was just like, who are these people? I had never heard of these guys. And I'm making like notes on a like paper and everything. And then when I go to the big house and taste, and I was like,
Right.
right. It just, it was, that's the only way I can describe it. And I came back and I was like, I am going to find everything out, because what I felt when I tasted those grower champagnes was this liveliness, this energy. And I went back to the store to buy the wine to go back. And I asked the guy who owned the store, I said, who should I follow in America that is the champagne person? Who is the person? And he said, Peter Lim. And I started following Peter Lim and kind of like, okay, who is he? And then I started reading all like Helen Thomas and following Essie Valland. And then I was like, okay, well, I need to invest in champagne personally. And I went back and I knocked on doors of all these growers, because I said, I'm going to spend my money. I'm going to go talk to them. I'm going to knock on their door. I want to be interested in them. And they were like, sure. They like welcome me in their homes. Like, it wasn't like, oh, let me welcome you in office. No, come to my home. Oh, you're coming to IE? Let's come in here and Lallier. And I was like, oh my goodness. And I just started tasting through champagnes. And then I started going to the industry conference that is in Champagne every April. And I was tasting the Vin Clairs. And then I was tasting, the finished product. And I was tasting vintages. And I would go to this one wine bar and he had like over 500 champagnes by the bottle. And I was like, Nicholas, don't give me anybody I've had before. And I would hand him the list and he was like, okay. And we just started tasting through. And, now I look back and like, I was just there in April and I took another colleague and we tasted over 415 champagnes in 5 days. Because it's a fair of nothing but champagne, right? Everybody's who's BO, everybody who's Special Club, everyone who's Terra de Vin. Like, you just go. And I tell people that is like my own money. So I'm not like being sponsored to go. I'm not being sponsored. I just believe in that so much. And because so many people make a method champenois, I wanted to know why. I needed to know why are we all so obsessed with bubbles, right? Not just me. I mean, so many people, and I love champagne, but I'm drinking MCC. I drink Cava. I drink Prosecco. I drink Petnet. If it has a bubble in it, pretty much I'm going to drink it. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so now sorry, I asked you two halves of a question. So what are some of your favorite champagne pairings, particularly like unexpected stuff?
Okay, so I know somebody's gonna be like, ooh, sweet champagne, demi-sec champagne and flaming hot Cheetos. You have the sweet and you have the heat, right? So I love those two together. So I also love if you're having like plain Doritos, like with the cheddar. A Blanc de Noir, any kind of like Blanc de Noir champagne, or if you're having Blanc de Blanc, Chardonnay, I like Lay's because Ruffles doesn't have enough salt. And I'm trying to get that acid Brut Nature like together. So for me also, I like Brut and Cool Ranch Doritos as well. If somebody's from Michigan on here, they have a chip called Better Made. Better Made just makes different chips. It's like a Michigan chip brand.
Okay.
I love that brand with extra Brut, right? So if I'm really specific about this, right? If I'm doing Cape Cod plain, I want a Brut Nature. But if I'm doing Boulder Canyon avocado rich chips, I want an extra Brut. I want a little more sugar. Yo,
awesome.
Like Will Blackman is like demi-sec and buffalo wings. Like, yes, like I'm always thinking about, but I'm a salty person. So I'm not like cake, right? I'm not a person who's like, just give me a piece of cake. So I'm always like chips are my thing. Like I love blue cheese and rosé. And, once a month I treat myself to the very glorious quarter pounder with cheese. You know that burger? You heard of that burger? And I always have it with Laurent Perrier rosé.
Nice.
It is just...
I think champagne has it's typecast itself by being this like haute couture kind of something for only the fanciest of foods, and really it goes so well with things with salt and fat. So
French
like you're talking
fries,
about chips,
French
you're talking
fries,
about a
chips,
burger, you're talking about
burgers.
fries, talk about like
Hmm.
one of my favorites is just like popcorn. Like popcorn and
Yeah.
champagne is an amazing thing. Um,
Okay, but we have to talk. Is it movie butter popcorn? Is it less butter popcorn? Because that's a different champagne, depending on the butter factor. Is that act or is that Orville Redenbacher? Or are you making it from home? Those all determine which ones like I'm going to have. And like if I'm going to have a rosé, is it Chardonnay focus first or is it Pinot Noir? Right.
right?
So I like Orville Redenbacher in the mini bag, the movie theater popcorn. I love that with Benoit Marguerite Shaman 16 because it's mainly Chardonnay.
Well, your champagne selection is, I think, more diverse than mine is.
Well, I go to Champagne twice a year, so I have an excuse. I go to Champagne twice a year, and some people like some women like shoes, some women like bags. I buy champagne. That is
Awesome.
what I buy. And also, too, I'm getting it in champagne, so I'm not getting the markup. And what I go to a store and I ask them, I'm like, what's new? What's interesting? What can you look and see what I didn't have and put a few bottles of those in so I can take them back?
I think that's amazing advice, honestly, for people who are interested in exploring any particular region or subgenre
Mm-hmm.
of wine. Is go to a knowledgeable independent shop, give them some parameters, like you can tell them the price you're looking for, and basically say, okay, fill up a case for me.
Yeah.
Fill up interesting stuff
You mean
because you'll
one
find
case?
stuff that you never knew, or two cases,
Okay,
or
two.
five cases, whatever your pick your capacity and your budget. Um, but I think people really underutilize the great independent retailers out
Yeah.
there and figure that um, like somehow those retailers are gonna tell them about the stuff that they need to sell, not the stuff that they're excited about. And that's really that nothing could be farther from the case in most of my experiences.
No, the independent retailers really they I worked 4.5 years at a wine store in DC, and you really get behind people. You see people come in, or you think about like the store I worked at was near college, right? It was next to a college Barnes and Noble, but it was also next to Chipotle. And so I would like ask people Chipotle, like, what did you have? Like, what are you having? Like, what are you thinking about? Let's talk about it. And usually those people are like, oh, I thought you were going to give me like a fancy wine. And I'm like, no, you got a barbacoa bowl. I think you were this Rioja would be just wonderful with that because you actually don't have sour cream on it. And it made it really fun, right? And if you want something that's really expensive, that's great. We can help you with that too. But at the end of the day, we want you to be happy. We want you to drink what you like. We want you to drink something and keep coming back because you trust us enough to say, we're not going to like try to get rid of something. We're pushing what we actually like, whether that's a $10 bottle of wine or $100 bottle of wine. You have to find independent people. To me, that it's just fun, right? They really get behind and they champion that, and it's a good cause. And sometimes like it seems like they're championing because they want to get rid of it. It's not that we're championing because we believe in it,
Yep.
right?
And honestly, I mean, just the chance to connect with other people who are excited about the same stuff. Like
Yeah.
it's such a treat. It's a treat from a winery standpoint. It's a treat from a retail standpoint. It's a treat from a som standpoint. I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
really sort of where it's all at. I cannot believe it. I looked up at the clock and I try to keep these to half an hour, and it's already been 40 minutes. Um, I didn't mean to keep you here this long. I so appreciate you taking a chunk out of your Wednesday afternoon. I do want to finish just by giving you the chance to share like your Substack, how people can follow you, where people can find more about what you do, your website, all of that. So can you share
Yeah.
those?
So on any social, I'm just at Julia Coney, really simple. Substack is juliaconey.substack.com or juliaconey.substack.com. And I'm on all the things. I was like, tell people, DM me, I will answer. I just like connecting people with wine. I tell people all the time, wine is a community, and what I'm trying to do is build a community. That's really it. I just want to build community through wine.
I think you've done more to do that than just about anybody else I know. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. We had a good time in Paso this year.
Yes, we did.
Yeah, we had a
Yes, we
lot of
did.
fun.
Awesome. Well, I hope our paths cross in person again soon. And meanwhile, everybody who's been watching, thank you for joining. Please
Thank
do
you.
follow everything that Julia does. She's amazing. Um, And I will be back in 2 weeks. My guest in 2 weeks is going to be Clive Pursehouse, who is the American editor for Decanter magazine. They're setting up a whole new thing, a whole American division of Decanter. So it'll be fun to talk to him about that. Meanwhile, I think it's probably better than 50-50 chance we'll start harvesting between now and then. So wish us luck.
I wish you all the luck. I wish you all the luck. Great harvest this year. Great harvest. Yes.
Thanks, Julia.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Jason.
everybody, for joining. I'll see you in a couple weeks.
Bye.
Bye.